API in the simplest form. I want to explain that. So recently, I delivered this system to a client. It's a hospital management system, and we were installing it in the client server. And the client wanted to know how the system works. They were interested. So I basically try to explain that the system works in I break it down into three ways. That is, we have the front end. This is what they can see here once they log into the system. Then we have the back end. That is where the entire logic happens, the storing, retrieval, uh, saving of data, and all that. Then we have something we call the API that brings all this together. So I try to explain this, and this is what they were interested in, and they wanted to know the API. So that's what I want to explain in the simplest form. So I'll explain. I'll open this here so that I explain. Now, we've talked about this here system where we have the UI. This is what you see. Then we have the backend here. The backend. This is where all your logic happens. Your data, storing your data, and all that, retrieval and all that. Then now as a user, you can't access this directly. So basically, users we deal with this part here, the UI, what we see. But now our data is not stored on the UI, it is sent to the backend. And for it to happen here, have this thing that connects the two here. Between the back and the front, that is what we call API or the application programming interface. Now this connects the two. So that when you make a request, this is sent to the backend, and the backend process the request that you've made, and it brings this back. So in the simplest, I want to give a simple form so that we understand how it is. You walk into this view here. You walk into a hotel or a restaurant. So you walk into a hotel. You sit on your table. Once you sit on your table, you ask for menu. So on your table, you ask for your menu, you get your menu, and you go through the menu. Then you select the items that you want to eat. Let's say you pick something that you want to eat here and a drink. So once you do that, there is this process now here of making the request. I'm going to do this here. Then I want to do the backend here. In this case, backend is the kitchen. So you have the kitchen there. Now you can't walk. You can't walk all the way to kitchen. So there is someone in the middle here. So someone in the middle here. Yeah. So we have this waiter here. So the waiter will come to you, or the waitress will come to you and take your request from the menu. So they take your request, then whatever you ordered, they take this request back to the kitchen. Then the chef here now, chef will do processing or process or make your order and cook whatever you want. Then the waiter will pick whatever you requested again. Now the waiter picks, then the waiter brings it back to you. Now, this is a simple explanation of an API. So the API in this case is the waiter, or the waitress. The waitress connects you and the kitchen so that when you make your order, it simply goes through the waitress who takes to the chef, then the chef sends. So when you think of a system, when you're having that, when you're interacting with the system on the front end, you make your form input, you enter data into the input. So what happens is the API transmits this. So the API, now these, when you do this, when you input something, these are put requests. These are put requests. So the put request is sent to the backend here now. Now the backend will process these, and depending on whatever you want, if the case here is put, which means this is to store. So these will be sent to our DB, our database, and it will be stored. So in case here, you make a query search, you request, or in this case, our hospital system, you search for a patient. You search for a patient. So in this case, the query request is get. Simply you want to get some information. So that information is sent, the API sends that to the backend, and the backend does a search of the DB. And once that patient is gotten, it is sent, or the server sends that now to the API again. So the API gets that patient, that is a now get request, and again it brings you to the front end and you see the details. So basically, in a simple term, that is how the APIs work, and that is how most all the programs are built. So you have the front end, you have the middleman who is the API, and you have the back end which does all the processing logic. So I hope you got that and you understood. So thank you, and that is how API works. So until the next one, I'm out. Peace and bye bye.